Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior, respected, and accomplished expert in our scriptures from Mumbai, India, Jaya Rao. Jaya ji, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Jayaji is the Chief Executive Officer of the Vedanta Vision and the Managing Trustee of Vedanta Trust. So, Jayaji, we're going to focus our discussions today on the Bhagavad Gita, but a few questions for you on Vedanta before that.
Okay.
Vedanta declares that our true nature is Satchit Anand, pure existence, consciousness, and bliss. If this is our natural state, why does suffering seem to be dominant experience?
Yeah. See, you're absolutely right. Our original nature is Satchidananda, which means infinite bliss.
Correct.
Now, for some reason, we don't know it. And because we don't know it, we imagine a void, an emptiness, a sense of unfulfillment that we feel within ourselves.
Mm.
Then thoughts arise in our mind that go out into the world to fill that void.
Mm.
Because like even physics says, nature abhors vacuum. So these thoughts then consolidate as desires.
Right.
And when the desire is fulfilled, you are satisfied. When the desire is not fulfilled, you are in a state of mental agitation. And all of this causes a lot of stress and strain because you're then dependent on the world.
Mm. Mm. Well said.
So the solution to this is to gain knowledge of our fullness rather than chase after objects of desire.
Correct. Correct. Well said. You have taught Vedanta, Jayaji, for many, many years. What have you found to be the greatest obstacle preventing people from recognizing their true self? Is it ignorance, ego, desire, fear, or something else completely different?
Okay, before we embark on the answer here,
Yeah.
I think we should clarify that Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita are not different.
Correct.
Vedanta is the subject. Bhagavad Gita is one text that explains Vedanta.
Absolutely.
It's like physics is a subject. A book written by a particular author is like the Bhagavad.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now coming to your question, what is the main thing that prevents people from gaining more knowledge or benefiting from it and becoming better human beings? Is complacency. What we call as being acclimatized to sorrow.
Yeah.
Just as a slum dweller, a person who was born in the slums and has grown up in the slums, doesn't understand the pain of living in the slums, the filth, the dirt, the unsanitary conditions, all of that he gets acclimatized to. So he is apparently happy there. In the same way, we are in a way in spiritual slums. So we don't understand that there could be a state better than this. And I think this has been portrayed so well in Plato's metaphor, where he speaks of generations of people living in a cave, and they seem to be quite content in that foul air and the darkness. Except when one young man gets up and says, there has to be something beyond this little cave. And he ventures out and comes out into the open, and he is in raptures. Then he thinks of the generation back in the cave and goes back and explains to them, talks to them about the new world. But they don't get it because they don't understand what he's talking about. He's talking about the sun, about fresh air, rivers, fauna, flora, all of which are unknown to these people. So this is the main problem. How do you explain a state of happiness, a state of independence from the world to people who seem to be quite content wherever they are?
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yaji, many spiritual traditions speak about transcending the ego. Vedanta seems to suggest understanding the ego rather than destroying it. What is the Vedantic view of ego and its rightful place in our life?
Yes, see, you can't go about trying to destroy ego. It's not possible in the first
Correct.
place. The way to go about it is to understand how
Correct.
did the ego come into being in the first place. So let's take an example. On the surface of the mighty ocean, a little tiny bubble forms.
Mhm.
What is the bubble? It's the same ocean water enclosing a little bit of air. So it's no different from the ocean.
Yeah.
But because it exists in a particular form, a particular shape, a particular configuration, it assumes an identity of its own. And then it has to become bigger, it has to compete with other bubbles, it has to demolish other bubbles, and then it becomes the biggest. And what happens? It bursts. Through this change, if you look at it from the ocean's point of view, nothing has happened. It's the same volume of water, same volume of air, same thing, except in our imagination. And ego is the same thing with us. So what happens is, although we are that totality, because we assume an identity that is separate from the totality, that is the starting point of the ego. In other words, the day you're born, the ego is there because you are separate.
Very interesting.
And then we assert that ego that I want to compete with others, I want to be better than others, I want to demolish others, and all of this comes in. But right through, if you have the knowledge that I am the spirit, I am this mighty, vast expanse of reality. And just because they call it Nama Rupa, because you have a name and a form, you consider yourself separate. Even when you think you're separate, you are in fact not separate.
Very interesting.
So then they have identified how does the ego function. The ego functions as I alone exist. This you see on the roads of India. Everybody drives as if they are the only ones on the road.
Yes.
Then I am supreme. I am the best. Like Muhammad Ali said that when he was a boxing great. And then I am the doer. This doership all of us have. You know, a lady who cooks a meal thinks I am the doer. So even if she forgets to put salt in the food, her husband dare not say it because he'll be demolished. You know, it's like that. Because all of this adds to our agitation, all of this adds to our fragile state. Because if anyone says anything that hurts our ego, we are in sorrow.
Beautifully explained. Thank you. JJ, let's now come to the Bhagavad Gita. And I know I could have a conversation with you for hours, but I have a few questions. And my first question is that the Gita begins not with enlightenment, but with Arjun's breakdown. Why is an emotional collapse often the starting point of spiritual awakening?
That's a very good question. In fact, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says there are 4 kinds of people who worship the higher. He says the first is Artharthi, a person who goes to a temple, church, or mosque and puts a donation there in the belief that God will bless him with 10 times the profits. That's an Artharthi. The second is Artha, distressed. And this forms the majority of the people who turn to spirituality or religion. So when you get a hard knock on the head, when things don't go well in your life, particularly when you lose a loved one, and there are many questions in your mind and which cannot be answered, then you tend to turn towards the higher. So in Arjuna's case, that was so. Arjuna and Krishna were friends from childhood.
Correct.
He didn't ask him such questions then, all through. He only asked him when he was on the brink of collapse and grief and wanted help. And so many of us are like that, which is why the Gita starts with Arjuna Vishada Yoga means the yoga of Arjuna's grief.
Very interesting. Throughout the Gita, Krishna moves from practical advice to the highest metaphysics. Why is self-knowledge ultimately presented as the solution to every human problem?
Because it's the truth.
Okay.
See, but before that, knowledge proceeds from the known to the unknown. So a speaker, not necessarily Krishna or any spiritual training, but any speaker, any communication, any teacher has to come down to the level of the student, inspire the student at that level, and then slowly, bit by bit, lift him to the highest that the teacher wants to communicate.
Correct.
This is the principle Krishna follows. All the Upanishadic masters follow that. They come down to our level. And what are we facing? We are facing problems. Arjuna in particular was facing the problem of his life. So he comes down to our level and tells us what we can do to get relief from the stress. And then when we are in a relatively calm frame of mind, we are open to higher knowledge. But at the same time, the teacher has also to give an indication of what the goal is, the ultimate goal. So Krishna, you find in the Bhagavad Gita, keeps alternating. When he speaks of the highest and he finds us or Arjuna going a little blurry, excuse me, not able to understand what he's saying, it quickly comes down to his level.
Correct.
And then when he's understood it and is ready for more, he lifts him to a higher understanding. So this keeps going on till the 18th chapter.
Absolutely. Jayaji, the very famous verse is to focus on action, which is karma, and not the results. My question is the Gita really asking us to be detached from outcomes or detached from our emotional dependence on outcomes?
In a way, both. Essentially, what that verse talks about, it's karmanye vadhikaraste, means you have a right only to action, not to the fruit. So what he's actually saying is that in life, whatever field you're engaged in, you really don't have any control over the result. Because the result depends on so many other factors.
Absolutely.
But what you have complete control over is your action. Action means not just action. Your thought behind the action, the intention behind the action, the attitude behind the action, the purity of mind that supports that action. You have complete control over. And that the present action itself is future result. So if you put 100% of your mind directed to the present action and do it to the best of your ability, the result will come. It has to come.
Well said.
If not now, at some stage it will come. So this has been beautifully portrayed in a movie called The Peaceful Warrior in English. It's a Hollywood movie where the student is a Stanford University student gunning for the Olympic gold in gymnastics. So he drives into a gas station and that gas station attendant seems to be his guru. So I'm not going to the rest of the movie, but when he meets with an accident and it's unlikely that he will be selected to the Olympics because it was just a few months ahead and he's heartbroken, it's the guru who tells him, what kind of life are you leading? You're constantly looking at the fruit over which you have no control. Why don't you just focus on the present? You know, whether you're selected for the Olympics or not is not in your control.
Absolutely.
Even if you are selected, whether you get the gold or not depends on how others function. But nobody can take away the fact that you are an outstanding athlete. Just focus there. And it's shown pictorially so beautifully how he gets himself to just enjoy the present. And then the present seems to unravel in slow motion because you enjoy it so much, because you're so totally focused in it. And
Nice.
if we learn this art, which Krishna speaks of in the Bhagavad Gita and the movie speaks of in this Peaceful Warrior, we've got it.
Very nice. Very nice. Jayaji, Krishna does not remove Arjun's problem. Instead, he transforms Arjun's understanding. What does this teach us about solving challenges that we face in our life all the time?
This is based on a fact of life
Correct.
that you can't change anyone around you, not even your dearest disciple.
Right.
All that. So Krishna's teachings are based on this truth that he can't change Arjuna. And he can't even transform his thinking. All he can do is present the knowledge which he doesn't have and hope that he gets inspired to do the right thing. So if you notice, Krishna really does not focus so much on how to fight the battle.
Yeah.
He focuses more on the higher, on the supreme.
Correct.
That, Nainam Chindanti Shastrani, for instance, no weapon can kill this, so on and so forth. But Arjuna doesn't get it. He doesn't get to the state of realization.
Yeah.
He just gets enough inspiration to fight the war and win it. So even though the teacher gives the entire knowledge, the student takes only to the extent the student is capable of. So it's not in his hands, and that's why in the 18th chapter he says, I have given you all that I have to give you. Now it's up to you. Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru means you do what you like. He doesn't even say do what you think is right. He just says do what you like and he leaves it.
Yes.
So that's the right approach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Moving on, the Gita describes the mind as both a friend and an enemy. What determines which role a mind plays and at what time?
Yes. So the difference is, see, fundamentally, the mind is something that we all need, we have, and it's a beautiful thing to have. But it's like a child in you. It needs guidance, it needs protection, it needs advice. This comes from your own intellect, buddhi. So a mind that is directed by the intellect, governed by the intellect, is your greatest friend. It can take you to the heights of perfection.
Correct.
The same mind ungoverned by the intellect, if the intellect is not available or not strong enough, becomes your greatest enemy, because then you keep falling for temptation. You make the wrong choices. You opt for instant pleasure versus deferred gratification, and you ruin everything.
Very interesting. Why does the Gita place such emphasis on mastering desires rather than fulfilling them?
Yes, that's a nice question. For the simple reason that desire in its essence can really not be fulfilled. If you see, we start life with one desire.
Correct.
And that one desire, when you fulfill, leads to another 25 desires. Those 25 in turn lead to... So it's like, that's why in the Gita, desire is equated to fire. Just as no fire can be fulfilled in that sense, it always wants more. Similarly, desire is like that, and it creates a fire of greed and avarice and all of these things in us, which are unquenchable. So what they tell us is, and in fact, the truth is that desire cannot be removed, cannot be eradicated. All that you can do is rise above desire. So we've experienced that. As children, we all had infinite desires for toys.
Correct.
It was never satisfied. But then you grow into a teenager. Let's say a young girl grew into a teenager and learned the thrill of the first date or the first crush that she had on somebody. And what happens to the toys? They fall by themselves of their own accord.
Correct.
Because the emotional thrill is so fulfilling that the physical ones no longer have a hold on.
Right.
So, this is the principle on which the entire spiritual path is based. That's why it's so important to fix a higher ideal, to have this vision expanded to accommodate more people in your sphere of interest, and dedicate yourself to something, whatever it is that you're doing.
Correct.
And that changes the nature of your work. It makes it magical. Like Nadal was dedicated to tennis.
Correct.
Sachin Tendulkar to cricket. Music, Ustad Bismillah Khan to music. And then it changes the very texture of your action.
Right.
It inspires other people.
Right.
So what really works, what leads to success is not the action. It is the spirit behind it. You could cook a simple dish inspired by something higher and it turns out magical.
Correct. Correct. What a great response. One of the most difficult concepts in the Gita is Dharma. How does one discover one's Dharma in a rapidly changing modern world?
Yeah, see, Sanskrit is a very, very flexible language.
Yeah.
The same word can mean different things in different situations. So the word dharma is in the Sanskrit dictionary, goes into pages because it means different things.
Correct.
But in the context of your question, it seems to indicate what is your dharma in terms of your core interest in life, your passion in life, the field in which you ought to invest your energies and vitality. Is that not true?
Yeah.
Yes. So dharma also means, incidentally, ethics, morality,
Correct.
Things like that. Duty. So your question is, how does one identify one's dharma in the midst of this ever-changing world that we are in, right?
Yes.
The fundamental thing we need to do is to just look within. And this is an opportunity our generation had when we were kids. We didn't have that many distractions. So often we were left on our own to think freely. And somehow in those moments of solitude, we identified our passion in life.
Yeah.
What is it that I want to do? What was I born to do? And then the rest became easy. So now we need to make a special effort to look within. So we often tell people, spend a few moments thinking, go back into your past of what are the things that attracted you. What is it that you wanted to continue to do even when your parents called you to dinner? Things that held your attention. And write it down. So maybe you write 2 or 3 things. Repeat the process after a fortnight when you've forgotten what you've written.
Yeah.
Start afresh. Then what will happen is that 1 or 2 things will keep repeating.
Very
and
nice.
Between them, now you've shortlisted it. You identify, okay, this is my passion. And that's how you arrive at it. But there are a few people who are lucky enough to know their passion right from early childhood.
Yeah.
Like this Suryavanshi, for instance, at 15. So he must have known at 3 what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
But some of us are not that clear. So we need to put in a little effort to find out what are dharma. And then that becomes your dharma.
Right.
That becomes your duty.
Absolutely. Amazing. But can dharma ever conflict with personal happiness? And if so, which should prevail?
See, actually, if you look at it, dharma is what your most predominant desire is. Now, if many of us entertain desires that take us in different directions. So when you fulfill one, something or the other gets frustrated. Under this scenario, what is the thing to do is to identify a desire that is very strong in us. Then what happens? The lower desires don't bother you anymore. So then there's no conflict. Like, for instance, I heard an interview of Virat Kohli, who is supposed to be very careful about his fitness and diet and so on and so forth. So someone asked him, you're a Punjabi and you're from Delhi. You must have had a desire for chole bhature? So he says, yes, I love chole bhature. Then what happened? He says, because my desire shifted to becoming an outstanding cricketer, for which I had to follow a diet, exercise, so on and so forth. So it kind of receded to the background. But even now, when I'm in Delhi and I feel like chole bhature, I have it. But I make sure that I work it out, I exercise more, or I'm careful what I eat after that, so that I nullify the effects of that. So I think we should follow that principle, which is pursue the higher. If the lower desires come and bother you, give vent to them whenever possible, so that it's out of your system.
Very interesting. Jaya, you have time for 3 more questions for you. The Gita presents us with multiple paths: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Are these different paths roads to the same destination, or are they stages of the same journey?
They are parts of one path. So that one path is spiritual growth. And it has been kind of divided into 3, because we have 3 equipment through which we function. The body, with which we act, mind feels emotions, and the intellect thinks. So now, if you want to rise faster, you've got to fire on all fronts. So what is recommended is all 3 to be practiced in proportion of your personality, because some of us are more intellectual, some of us are more activity oriented, and some are more emotional. So Karma Yoga is acting in a spirit of service and sacrifice for a higher goal. And as we saw earlier, when your attention is on the higher, the lower gets kind of fades away. Bhakti Yoga is whenever you feel emotions, and all of us do feel emotions, redirect them towards the higher. Now, some people are content to be just grateful for some higher power that has gifted us with so many things. So whenever you come across anything good in life, like you look at a sunrise or a flower or anything, you see it as the hand of God.
Correct.
And you admire it, and you connect with God, and you're grateful to God for having given you all this.
Well said.
Some others need a form, a murti, to pour out their emotions of love towards, like Mirabai with Krishna, or Sant Tukaram with Vithoba. There is, or Sri Ramakrishna with the goddess.
Correct.
But that's immaterial. You are just pouring out your love. And then that entity gets precedence over my personal desires. So that's how desires reduce.
Correct.
Jnana Yoga is where you use your intellect to understand that everything in the world is passing, temporary, ephemeral, and therefore not worth your selling your soul for. So you then search for the permanent, and you get kind of disconnected with the world. You're no longer a stakeholder in the world's enjoyments. So if you practice all 3 in the proportion of your personality,
Right.
there is a meteoric rise in your personality. So ideally, we should use all 3.
Yeah.
And then we get to the state of uparati, or withdrawal from the world. Then you become naturally, automatically meditative by nature. So you do dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation. And the final thing is you explode into that state of samadhi.
Very nice. The Gita speaks of liberation while living. What does freedom, or what could freedom look like in the life of any ordinary person?
You know, if you observe a prisoner in a prison, okay, for how long does he feel bound by the prison? Very soon he get acclimatized to it.
Yeah.
And then he's fighting for privileges in the prison. So the world, that prison becomes his world. Similarly, we are like that. We are born in the prison of our body, mind, and intellect. And because it's been there always, we don't know what freedom is. So that mumukshatva, the desire for liberation, is considered the most important quality that we need to get to that state of realization. So an awareness that I am bound. Let's say the football World Cup is going on.
Yeah.
If I have a desire for that, I am stuck from now onwards till the final of the World Cup to TV.
Correct.
Whenever there is a match on, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
That is bondage. If I'm interested in cricket, those so many hours of cricket, I'm stuck to the TV. Yeah. Similarly, desires. If I have a desire for shopping, for, I don't know, whatever it is, that binds me. And when I understand that, there is that desire to liberate myself from this prison of my own making. And that's a very important quality.
Very, very fascinating. And my last question to you, Jayaji, and we're going to come to the present world. If Lord Krishna were addressing today's world of artificial intelligence, social media, hyper-consumerism, and constant distraction, which teachings of the Gita do you think he would emphasize the most strongly?
Well, you know, the basic principles remain the same.
Absolutely.
In all ages, to all people.
Correct.
The only thing that will change is the method of delivery. The instrument you use with which to communicate to people.
Right.
So Krishna would not use the terminology that he uses in the Gita. He will use modern terminology. AI, this, that, and the other. But the core would remain the same, which is use of the intellect. Now, whether it is AI or some other far more sophisticated thing, it cannot duplicate what a human being is. So you go back to that and you remain the master of all science and technology, for which you need to develop the intellect.
Right.
Like right now, we say doom scrolling, for instance. Why does a person fall prey to doom scrolling? Because the intellect is non-functional. So you keep scrolling. The mind wants to scroll, or sometimes it just becomes a habit. So when you have a strong intellect, you use the same technology. You use AI, you use ChatGPT, you use all of this. But with the intellect deciding how much, how often, to what extent to use it.
Very interesting. And on that note, Jayaji, I just want to say, what a fascinating conversation this one has been. You know, I've read a lot myself about some of the scriptures, but just talking to you made it so much easier to understand. And, you know, in the last 30 minutes, I think we've just barely managed to scratch the surface. And I sincerely hope I'm going to keep reaching out to you on some of the other scriptures that we have, because people in India want to learn more, but they don't really understand how to reach out to people who know this. But thank you again so much for speaking to me, and all the very best. Thank you, Jaya.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.